Hello and welcome to Brick Speak. I'm your host, Brigadier Rakesh Bhatia. In today's episode, we'll talk about operational art displayed by China and Vietnam during the 1979 Sino-Vietnam War. At the end of this episode, we'll be able to define operational art. We'll talk about strategic objectives as laid down by China and Vietnam prior to the war. What were the strategic approaches of China and Vietnam during the war? How did the two countries achieve tempo of operation? Did China and Vietnam achieve operational depth? How did China and Vietnam achieve operational reach? And in the end, how did China and Vietnam achieve simultaneity? I am expecting a question on operational art. However, if there is no direct question, you can use the knowledge obtained in this episode while answering your other question, which I am sure will fetch you extra marks. Define what is operational art. US Army Doctrine. Operational art is pursuit of strategic objectives through the arrangement of tactical actions in time, space, and purpose. Basically, operational art is a step which joins the strategy and the tactics on ground. The Joint Department of Defense doctrine says that operational art is the cognitive approach by commanders and staff. Cognitive approach means mental processes. That in turn includes perception, memory, and problem solving ability of a commander. So, the operational art is the cognitive approach by commanders and staff, supported by their skill, knowledge, experience, creativity, and judgment to develop strategies, campaigns, and operations to organize and employ military forces by integrating ends, ways, and means. In simple terms, operational art is the planning, execution, and sustaining temporally, that is separated by time, and spatially, that is separated by space, distributed maneuvers and battles, all viewed as one organic whole. I will try and explain this with an example. Let's say you have been given the responsibility of training a team for a particular sports. So first of all, you will organize the training schedule, which includes training sessions to build skills and stamina. In case of a military situation, if you are practicing operational art, you will decide on the training exercises so that the soldiers are prepared to carry out tactical operations to achieve strategic objective. Strategies for each game is developed based on opponent. Similarly, in military situation, we plan specific mission based on enemy strengths and weaknesses. Resources need to be managed both in a sports event as well as in a military situation. In military situation, you have to manage supply lines, equipment, and medical support to ensure that the military operation goes on unhindered. We have to plan rest and recovery. We have to schedule the rest periods and also rotation of troops. And in the end, make tactical adjustments during the tournaments based on outcomes, and in military situation, we have to adapt strategies and tactics during the campaign based on battlefield conditions. Having seen operational art, let's see where does it fit into the overall situation. This slide I have used in one of the previous episodes also. However, the same is being repeated because of the context. The political leadership states the political aim. Like in case of 1979, China's political aim was to teach lesson to Vietnam, for which a punitive action was planned. This political aim was converted into military aim and defined as capture stroke threaten Hanoi. The military aim in turn was converted into military strategy, which defined that the Chinese army will strike vital parts of defense using overwhelming force and manpower. In the process, cut enemy defenses into pieces, thereby breaking their resistance and eventually annihilating them. The strategy was executed through operational plan, which was that Chinese decided to go in for limited objective with rapid assaults. They focused on border region and they decided to withdraw moment their strategic objective is achieved. Connecting strategy with tactical plan was thus the operational plan. The tactical plan, which was evolved from the operational plan, was to use concentrated forces, heavy use of artillery and armor, infantry will assault, logistic support has to be ensured, and scorched earth tactics, that is, destroying everything that is contributing to Vietnamese defense, will be adopted. A question arises, why should we study operational art? Specifically in Sino-Vietnamese War, it was the last time that China committed ground forces. The case provides insight into China's threshold of use of force and decision-making process employed. By studying operational art, we'll also be able to understand how the Chinese and Vietnam fight land campaigns. The study provides insight into the future Chinese use of forces. Operational art has multiple elements, but most relevant to this study are tempo, which means frequency or pace at which things happen, operational reach, the distance and duration across which a force can successfully employ its military capabilities. Operational depth means extension of operation in space, time, and purpose. Simultaneity of operations mean events that exist, occur, or operate at the same time. The ultimate aim of all these factors is to achieve strategic objective. Let's now have a look at the events that led to the Sino-Vietnam War to understand the operational art which was employed. It was in April 1975 that two communist regimes took power in Southeast Asia. One was Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and the other was reunification of Vietnam on 30th of April 1975. Initially, both supported each other, and the Chinese aided both during the Second Indochina War, which was the war which Vietnam fought against the US. But both in case of Vietnam and China, there was a need to consolidate their internal power, which took precedence over the past support. The new Socialist Republic of Vietnam wanted to regain their historical hegemony in Indochina. In December 1975, Vietnam aided a government overthrow in Laos and permanently garrisoned soldiers there to protect Vietnamese interest. In December 78, Vietnam invaded Cambodia to replace Khmer Rouge regime of Pol Pot with one amicable to Vietnam's regional hegemony. This has been covered in detail in one of our previous episodes. Also in 1978, the Soviet Union and Vietnam signed Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation to counter Chinese influence and guarantee military and economic support for rebuilding Vietnam. The Vietnam Soviet Treaty went into effect prior to Vietnam's invasion of Cambodia and replaced a similar Sino Soviet treaty that was permitted to expire. In this environment, China was losing influence in the region to its historical little brother, that is Vietnam. To know details of all these events, please watch our playlist of Sino-Vietnam War 1979. Let's see what were the strategic objectives set by China and Vietnam during the war. For China, Deng Xiaoping wanted to consolidate its internal power. However, there were strategic objectives of eliminating the vulnerabilities of China. First, China wanted to discredit Soviet Union support of Vietnam. Recall that in 1960 there was a Soviet-China split that had taken place. China also wanted to deny Vietnam attempts to establish regional hegemony by diverting pressure from operations in Cambodia. China also wanted to cease Vietnam's frequent incursions into China and also normalize border relations and protecting ethnic Chinese in Vietnam. Vietnam's strategic objective was to dominate the Indochina region of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia to form an Indochina Federation. What strategic approaches did China and Vietnam use? China's approach was a limited offensive with ground forces to destroy Vietnam's defenses quickly to a depth that would threaten Hanoi. China also wanted to overwhelmingly use superior military force to destroy a weaker force at points of penetration, which is a positive aim to reduce an adversary's natural resources and capture territory when full defeat of enemy is not possible. On the other hand, Vietnam wanted to defend Hanoi without disrupting operations in Cambodia or Laos. To preserve combat power, Vietnamese military leaders visualized area defense to retain Hanoi. The Vietnamese forces approach relied heavily on 50,000 militia forces tasked to conduct security operations in the deep area. How did China and Vietnam achieve tempo of operations? China achieved a positive tempo with respect to enemy, both in operational and strategic environment. The opposed rate of movement, considering the effect of enemy and terrain, is 2.88 km per day as per the empirical data. However, the PLA destroyed the Vietnamese defenses and seized Cao Bang at the rate of 5 kilometers per day, which is almost twice the speed of empirical data. This shows high tempo of PLA. This tempo paralyzed the Hanoi decision-making process. It was on 5th of March that the Vietnamese army decided to reconfigure their defense forces and reinforce Lang Son. The time taken for this reinforcement was from March to July 79, well after the Chinese had withdrawn. There is no doubt that maintaining tempo is imperative to maintain a limited war. China displayed that it controlled the tempo throughout the operations and maintained the initiative and limited Chinese option. However, the Chinese operation lacked depth, which was required for overwhelming success. As far as Vietnam is concerned, aim of Vietnam was to slow down Chinese attack through an effective security zone and cause significant casualties for China to withdraw. But the Vietnamese army never controlled the tempo despite causing high PLA casualties, rating between 6.6 and 9.3% of the total Chinese forces that had attacked. This high casualty rates, however, did not force the PLA to culminate or lose the initiative. Hence, the tempo of the operation was with the PLA. Did China or Vietnam achieve depth? In case of PLA, both China and Vietnam could not affect their adversary in depth, which could shock the enemy. Both military forces fielded resilient forces capable of withstanding tactical failures and could not be defeated without use of depth. The battle at Long Son was indicative of operations conducted in depth. However, it lacked any major effect due to close fights. Not using Air Force seriously denied the PLA any deep strike capability. On the other hand, the Vietnamese defenses spanned over 900 kilometers and depth varied 160 to 280 kilometers. The Vietnamese forces attacked the Chinese airfield at Ninh Minh, which is 40 kilometers north of the border. However, it did not significantly destroy or displace PLA's lines of communication. Did China and Vietnam achieve operational reach? A weak logistic resupply system, which relied on militia forces or porters to carry supplies forward along the lines of communication, challenged the PLA's operational reach. Chinese air defense system had a limited range of 50 kilometers and could not be redeployed, because of which the Chinese forces had to make deliberate halts after every 50 kilometers. The Vietnamese forces' operational reach was sufficient to conduct their defenses in depth. Vietnam continued to reinforce their northern defenses after Chinese withdrawal until July 1979. This allowed Vietnamese army to continue operations in Cambodia and Laos and defend against further Chinese aggressions. China did achieve simultaneity by distributing their attack into three separate attacks. However, due to converging of routes into Hanoi, the effect of simultaneity was reduced. The simultaneous attack had a positive effect on China's tempo, and it also hit the ultimate objective of Chinese attack. Chinese simultaneous information operation in Vietnam territory to gain support of locals found limited success. PLA did form political units to operate in rear areas to spread propaganda, to protect Chinese civilians in the border regions and gaining support of the Chinese civilians' Vietnamese neighbors. Vietnam achieved simultaneity, successfully defending Hanoi against three distributed attacks. It continued operations in Cambodia. The Chinese high tempo did not result in an increased ability to control the tempo by Vietnam. Vietnam never transitioned to the offense or gained the initiative in any other way. With this, I come to an end to today's episode. You're requested to like, share, and subscribe. Keep working hard. Jai Hind.